Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, I will be deep diving what are quite possibly the best Imperial Guard rules that have ever been written. A system that has not been beaten in over 2 decades. A system which Guard players still pine after and go on about since they were written down in 4th edition. These are the Regimental Doctrines. Woohoo! Chills. Literal chills going down my spine right now. And whether you are a veteran or a greenhorn, you are going to find these rules fascinating, interesting, and downright tasty. So without further ado, let's fix bayonets. No, let's don our chem inhalers, wield our warrior weapons, and close order drill right into this.
Attention, guardsmen. The Commissariat has detected you have not yet liked this video. Do so immediately, or else you will face the Emperor's wrath. And anyone who has not yet subscribed to the channel will be transferred to the penal battalions. That is all. Move out!
So the big question is, what the hell are Regimental Doctrines? Well, they are a series of rules, systems, and customizations to make your Imperial Guard army your dudes. It was a system that was cooked up to represent how varied Guard regiments are. How having an infantry platoon from one world, it would be completely different to having an infantry platoon from another world. To represent how Mordian Iron Guard are going to fight totally differently, in an almost alien way in comparison to something like Valhallan Ice Warriors. This was the way that Games Workshop took a bunch of generic datasheets, because we've looked at the Guard platoon, we've looked at the Leman Russ, they're pretty generic units. How you take a group of generic units and you make them the most flavorful and individual and unique units from army to army. Essentially, how it worked is you got to pick your units, build your army list, and then you could start applying regimental doctrines on top of your army, on top of your collection, to try and make the army play in a unique or different playstyle. You didn't need to use them. There were some advantages and some disadvantages for using them. You could take a standard generic Guard army if you wanted to, or you could start delving into the wacky world of regimental doctrines to really build a force that was unique. Completely unique to you. There were some natural combos, there were some things that made sense to go together, and there were some just bonkers and balmy things in here. So that's the high level overview. Basically, ways of customizing your army. Fantastic. But how did it all actually work? Well, let's just read from the ancient scrolls themselves and see what it says. Although there is a great deal of standardization within the Imperial Guard, there are many regimental traditions and skills peculiar to their homeworld that make many regiments slightly different. It is this universal diversity that produces the myriad of different colors and flavors of Imperial Guard troopers and regiments. And to allow players to use the army list to produce their own specialized regiments, we have introduced a system called Doctrines. Doctrines are variations in training and organization that have an effect on the way a regiment fights. They are only relevant if you want your army to represent a particular regiment with minimal external support. Using the full list without doctrines is always a valid option and is perfectly representative of any number of regiments, from Cadian shock troops to Kachan jungle fighters to Drukian Fen Guard. If you want to use doctrines, the procedure is quite simple. You are allowed 5 doctrine points to define your regiment specializations. You do not have to use all 5, but there's no benefit in using less. All unit entries shown under the restricted troops heading below are unavailable unless you buy back these troops with some of your 5 doctrine points. Doctrine points can also be expended to give the regiment a different alternate organizational structure, skills, drills, and specialist equipment. Purchase of some doctrines may increase the basic costs associated with the various troop types. Unless specifically stated, doctrines cannot be taken more than once and never stack in any way. Doctrines cannot be used by troops who are allied to the Imperial Guard army, such as indentured Imperial Guard in an inquisitorial allied contingent. On pages 58 to 61, we have included some famous regiments and the doctrines which represent their typical organisation in battle. You will notice that some regiments may have more than 5 doctrines. This is a reflection of their glorious history. In practice, 5 doctrines is plenty to give a regiment a distinctive slant. Again, there is no requirement to use the doctrine rules for fielding any particular regiment. Doctrines are spread across 4 broad categories: restricted troops, alternate regimental organisation, skills and drills, and special equipment. Guard infantry. In several of the following doctrine descriptions, the term guard infantry unit is used. In this context, the definition includes any command squad along with its officer and any attached advisors, anti-tank squads, fire support squads, special weapons squads, if the regiment may use them, mortar squads, hardened veteran squads, normal infantry platoon squads, and armoured fist squads. Oh my god, I love it. I love how they specifically mention the word flavour, and I think the big thing with reading this is it's about 6 paragraphs long, but if this was written in modern 40k, it would be 6 pages long. The fact that they can just say they never stack in any way, and we know what that means as the players. If this is written today, there'd be this whole page going on about they can't stack. Stacking means this, blah, 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 blah. Legalese, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's just like verbal diarrhea. Whereas back in the day, because this was a war game written by war gamers for war gamers, things were just written in the language that war gamers understood. I think one of the worst things that GW has actually done, and it's not really their fault, it's not the fault, I actually don't put any blame on GW's feet for this. I put this entirely at our feet as a community, and it's taken me a few years and to get a little bit older and a little bit wiser to really understand this. But when people get so obsessed with rules as written, it actually ends up being just a massive ball ache. Games Workshop has again and again and again tried to really be very tight on their rules as written, and all that's ended up happening is rules just get overwritten. There's just too much going on. I think Horus Heresy 3.0 is a very good example of this. Like the fact that the way you charge things is like 7 pages long just to describe what a charge is. It's too much. It's I think it's even more. It's like 17. It's like 68 steps to doing a charge now, because they define every last thing. It's like people are equipped with magical weapons. Magical weapons are weapons that do magical damage. Magical damage, like blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. It goes on and on. Whereas I think this just is so indicative of the way the game was approached by players and the way that the game was thought about by the designers. They never stack. We don't need to define what that means. You know what it means. If you can't work that out, then you shouldn't be playing this game. It's that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's not being elitist. It's just being intolerant of bullshit. And I really think we need some of that back in 40k. But with all of that said, let's now have a look at the first way that we can spend our precious doctrine points, and that is on buying back, unlocking restricted troops. The first category of doctrines allows the regiment to select restricted troops. If you do not select a troop type as a restricted unit doctrine, then you may not include them in your army. Each of the entries listed on the right that you wish to use will take up one of your available doctrine choices. Selecting any of these doctrines will allow you to select the army list entry specified. The choices made say a lot about the world on which your regiment was recruited. Rattling and ogren squads imply a tolerance for abhumans that is not commonplace, as well as the existence of a community of these creatures on or close to the regiment's home world. Engineers are representative of close ties to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Conscript platoons denote a heavily populated or highly militarized world, and so on. For example, in the Death Corps of Krieg, infantry regiments are often closely supported by the Death Riders, a local form of Rough Riders mounted on cybernetically altered steeds. If you want to use doctrines to define the Death Corps, then you would start by selecting the Rough Rider doctrine to allow you to field units of Death Riders. The doctrine may be taken more than once to allow access to several restricted troop types. God, I absolutely love this system. It's just great. What I like is they don't need to define what the Death Corps of Krieg is on a specific data sheet. They're like, your whole army is Death Corps of Krieg. Now you need to start showing that by adding these layers onto it. So buy back the Death Riders. That's a great example. I also like how they go the extra mile to explain why certain units would be associated with certain regiments. Like, not every regiment is going to have a close tie to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Some regiments will, some regiments won't. Not every regiment is going to have like priests that are on the front lines, like battle priests. There'll be like a regimental chaplain, but he's probably not on the front lines. Whereas particularly pious regiments might have priests that are almost revered and respected as much as their officers. And then some worlds will focus on conscripts and quantity, and some worlds will focus on quality and having more elite troops. What I like about this, and it's really important to mention this because it's really easy to see this and go, wait, so unless you took regimental doctrines, you can't take tech priests? No, not at all. You can choose not to use doctrines. Remember, that's what they said. You can choose not to use them. You can have access to every single guard unit that you want. But if you want to use regimental doctrines, then you will need to buy back some units. But of course, this is not the only reason for doctrines. You have the skills and drills and additional war gear. And that's really where the meat is. Buying troops back is nice, but where the real flavor of this whole thing comes in is the alternate regimental organizations and everything else. The main Imperial Guard list assumes that the force being used is a combined one pulled together from units in the theatre of operations and based around a standard infantry regiment. There are many different kinds of regiment in the Imperial Guard, however, and by selecting any of these doctrines, you will change the nature of your regiment quite fundamentally. Quick side note here, I think it's really interesting how these days people talk about Guard soup like it's a bad thing. Like, oh, it's silly seeing Cadians and Death Corps of Krieg and Catachans all fighting together. But going back to 4th edition, going back to the Golden Codex, and that is how GW saw the Guard working on a fundamental level. That's why they used to sell so many different squads. You didn't just have Cadians and Krieg and Catachans, you had all the metal, Helens, Destroyers, and the idea would be that you could build a mono army if you wanted to, just using Mordians or whatever, and a lot of Guard players naturally do that because they like things being all neat and matching, you know, we like our uniforms. But absolutely having a platoon of Mordians fighting alongside a platoon of Cadians fighting alongside a platoon of Destroyers was very, very normal and shouldn't be discouraged whatsoever. What these rules do is allow you to reward players who do go monofaction, and that's something which is missing from modern 40k. Modern 40k is everyone is soup all of the time, and there's no reason why you wouldn't soup all of the time. But in old 40k, it was like, hey, here's how you can soup. Fantastic. You get access to all the units. The advantage of souping is all the units. The disadvantage of souping is you don't get to take some of these extra rules. But the disadvantage of going mono regiment is you might not get access to all of the units that you want. So it's a really good example of advantages and disadvantages, trade-offs, giving the player choice. Do they go for a more Guard soup regiment, giving them all the units, or do they sacrifice some unit availability and go mono regiment and then get to be able to have flavor and other bits and actually some pretty powerful abilities? Player choice, player agency. I love it. So what is our first alternate regimental organization? Well, we've got drop troops. One of the best and both famous and infamous options here. This regiment comes from a world where grav shoot use is commonplace and has been trained in their use for dropping into combat. Any Guard infantry unit without a Chimera transport or Sentinel squadron may deep strike if the mission permits. Other units must deploy conventionally As an aside, this doctrine could be rationalized by stating the troops are emerging from Imperial tunneling vehicles, although this would be much rarer. Not if you're in the Krieg, right? Hades drill, right? May not be combined with special equipment warrior weapons. That's because this is obviously representing a high-tech world, and warrior weapons are, as you'll see later on, to represent a low-tech world. But just focusing on drop troops for a moment, it's one of the coolest rules. Just make every infantry and sentinel in your army be able to deep strike. Is it broken? Not in the context of the time, because remember, deep striking units used to scatter, and if they landed in terrain, they might just die. So deep striking everything wasn't necessarily the best choice, but it's so cool. It represents a proper parachute regiment. Do you want the 101st Airborne, but 40,000 years into the future? You have got that. Do you want to do a bridge too far? You have got that. And you can use, most people when they use this, is they went like pure infantry and sentinels and didn't use any heavy armor, but it's not saying you can't use heavy armor. Do you want to have a Lemur in your list? Yeah, of course you can. Do you want to have mechanized units in your list? Yeah, of course you can. They come on normally. They just deploy normally. It's so cool. And I personally played a few games of this when I was a kid, and just deep striking your whole army was just utter madness, utter fun. Wasn't broken in any way, shape or form. Often you found units just like breaking the legs as they landed in forests and all that kind of stuff, but it was just the giggles that would happen between me and my opponents. It was like, another scar dies. Oh no. Oh man, good times. Drop troops, fun, flavorful, potentially powerful, but generally just bonkers. Next, we have one of the genuinely very powerful ones. This is the Grenadiers. This regiment comes from a world where the best Imperial Guard recruits are combined into elite formations and receive superior training that is the equal of that provided to Stormtroopers. The regiment may include 0 to 3 Stormtrooper squads as troops. These Stormtroopers may not deep strike or infiltrate, and because, again, warrior weapons are for primitives, you can't have warrior weapons with Grenadiers. A good way of looking at this through the lens of modern 40k is this is basically a regimental doctrine that would allow you to take your scions as battle line. But you didn't have to be locked into something like the Bridgehead Strike Force. You just spent one of your 5 doctrine points and you'd go, yep, I'm going Grenadiers. And then you spend another one of your 5 doctrine points and you'd buy back Stormtrooper squads. And now you've got Stormtroopers as battle line, but you've still got 3 doctrine points left over where you can start layering on even more rules on this. It's really cool. Just a great way of representing elite guard formations, and you've still got that flexibility. I think that is the number one selling point of Doctrines versus the way we have sort of detachments these days. Doctrines have a high degree of flexibility. Detachments lock you into things. Next up, we've got a really fun one for all the Steel Legion players: mechanized. The regiment is uniformly mounted in Chimera transport vehicles and specializes in mobile warfare. All guard infantry units must, not may, must take a Chimera transport, whether they are normally allowed to do so or not. This can't be combined with warrior weapons or light infantry, because light infantry was to represent your Catachans and stuff like that. So to a modern guard player, this one would be a bit strange, because surely you can mount people up in Chimeras if you want to. Well, back in the day, not everyone got a dedicated transport. I know in modern 40k you just get to pick up to 6 of each dedicated transport, so you can have like 6 Chimeras and 6 Tauruxes, but back in the day that was very rare. Normal guard infantry platoons had to foot slog it, and it was only these specialized armored fist squads that got to buy Chimeras for your basic troops. Other units like hardened veterans and I believe Stormtroopers could buy Chimeras anyway, but not everyone could go fully mechanized. Unless, of course, you went for the mechanized doctrine. And then you ended up with like whole platoons mounted up. And it was cool. It's very, very fantastic. So just a great way of being able to represent your Steel Legion. But there's not only alternate regimental organization sort of representing the structure of the regiment. You've also got skills and drills. This is the most extensive part of the regimental doctrines, actually taking up basically 2 pages. And this shows the way that your dudes fight. The way that Mordians fight in ranks, the way that Catachans skulk through the undergrowth, the way that maybe, Helens are hardened fighters. There's all sorts of different examples that you've got here. This is how your dudes fight. This is another very juicy layer of flavor. Skills and drills. These abilities represent techniques developed initially by veteran troops, which are then incorporated into the regiment's regular training drills to ensure successive generations of troops learn from their predecessors. Additionally, some abilities are a consequence of the homeworld on which the regiment was raised. First up, we have got diehards. The regiment is so firmly indoctrinated into the Imperial faith and its own martial traditions that they will stand against overwhelming odds. Any Imperial Guard infantry unit or Rough Rider squadron may be given this ability at a cost of plus 5 points, so that's for the whole unit, not per model. Die Hard squads do not count negative modifiers for morale for being outnumbered in close combat. I'm going to be honest, I never really saw the value in Die Hards because Guard infantry tended to just die in melee and you were probably going to just get swept anyway, but it is a cool one. And hey, I haven't played 4th edition in a long time, so if you're more of a veteran and you know that Die Hards is a good one, let me know down in the comment section. The one that I always thought was a bit better was Iron Discipline. Obviously, Iron Discipline for the Iron Guard. On many worlds of the Imperium, nobles are raised from birth to be officers. They have an air of confidence and authority that keeps their troops fighting to the last man. Any unit using the leadership characteristic of an officer or senior officer with the Iron Discipline ability for a morale or pinning test ignores the Maswell modifier for being under half strength and may regroup even if below half strength. Any officer can be given this ability for plus 5 points. So to me, this is a really big one because A, your officer can project his leadership via Voxcasters and Master Voxes, meaning that you could have this on one officer and then it's spread across to nearly your whole army, which is mental for plus 5 points. And the Maswell modifier for pinning and stuff is fine. For morale is pretty big. You don't know what, you just whatever your morale is, you're taking it at that. The other one though is being able to regroup below half strength. There's a lot of times when a guard unit would lose like 6 models, it would break, and then it would just flee and continue to flee off the board. It would struggle to regroup. Now you can just be like, hey, every turn, I'm going to get a chance to regroup, and if I've got a Voxcaster in there, there's a really high chance that my guys are going to regroup off my my officer's leadership 9. That's great. That's really good. So Iron Discipline, because you're not putting it on the units, you're putting it on the officer. To me, this is like an auto include. It basically means even my little scraplets are going to be getting back into the fight. Yeah, I like this one a lot. Next, we have independent commissars. Rather than using commissars as advisors, they always just have to be attached to command squads. Some regiments give them a free hand to roam the battlefield. These commissars act as independent characters with 1 to 3 forming a single elite choice. They are deployed as a single unit but do not need to be placed together and operate independently during the game. Commissars cannot be used both as an elite and an HQ choice. Every commissar selected costs plus 10 points. Great way of getting more commissars into your army. Great way of being able to attach them to units they wouldn't normally be able to attach to. Overall, fantastic. And I know a few people that took advantage of this. I mean, one thing that's going through my head is think about using this with a blob of conscripts. If we take a look at a conscript platoon, it's going to have leadership 5. That's not very good. And you can take 50 in one squad, but if you do, they're probably just going to get swept and broken in one go. If you took your big blob of 50 conscripts and then you attach a commissar there, which is normally an HQ choice, so you can attach a commissar, it can make them a lot more likely to stick around. Doubles their leadership. And if you have a look at how the commissars work, you may include 5 commissars in your army. These do not count as one of your HQ choices. Maybe take it in addition to your usual allocation of HQ units. Each commissar must join a separate unit in the army as described in the advisors rule. If you have a look at what advisors do, then it means that Commissars, priests, and sanctioned psychic advisors. For each type of advisor, one must be allocated to a command HQ. Any others of that type are then selected to platoon HQ squads. If all commanded HQs have been given advisor of a given type, the remainder are individually assigned to infantry squads, armored fist squads, or stormtrooper squads. Unattached advisors may not be used. So typically you'd have like a commissar join a command squad, and that would make the commander more likely to do, more like to, it'd give him a better leadership buff. You can see here you've got like summary execution and all this kind of stuff. But taking independent commissars means he goes to 50 points. Sure, fine, don't care about that. But then you can attach him to something like a big brick of conscripts, doubling their leadership and making them more likely to stick around. One thing that is worth mentioning, the summary execution rule with commissars, is technically it says you have to execute an officer or a sergeant leading the squad. Conscripts don't technically have a sergeant or officer, but this is where we get into the whole rules as written versus rules as intended. And I'm going to tell you right now, the commissar is going to execute a conscript. If he's going to execute an officer or sergeant, he's going to execute a conscript. So if I was playing with independent commissars, I would absolutely have summary execution work with any of the units that they end up joining via the independent commissar rule. Next, we have close order drill. My personal favourite. Of course it is. Everyone gets to fight in ranks. Members of the regiment are thoroughly drilled in fighting in dense formations where they can present a hedge of blades and bayonets and clubbed lasguns at the enemy. This drill is only used by units in standard infantry platoons and conscript infantry platoons. To perform close order drill, all models in the unit must be in base-to-base contact. While in close order, all models in the unit have +1 leadership and +1 initiative. Note that the leadership bonus only applies when using the unit's own leadership, not that of an officer within 12 inches, for example. So it means that if you've got like a leadership like 7 guardsmen, he goes up to leadership 8, but you'll probably be using your officer leadership. Really, it's for the +1 initiative, which is actually a pretty big deal if you're defending an obstacle. Because Space Marines are typically initiative 4 and Guardsmen were initiative 3, and there was none of this if you charge you automatically go first. It was just you charge in, who's got the higher initiative, they go first. So if I go up to initiative 4, it means I get to fight at the same time as Space Marines, and sometimes it means I get to fight before other guys. Like if a bunch of I think Orcs or Turners, which are typically initiative 3, charge in, normally we'd fight at the same time. But if I have close order drill, it means I get to fight first. I believe that's how it's worked. I am going off when I used to play this as a kid. I never used to care what the leadership or the initiative bonus was, I'll be real. I just always used to rank my guys up and say they were close order drill because it looked great. I love how there's a little example of how close order drill works. They don't have to be like, oh, you have to be in base-to-base contact with one of the models and all that. It's like, no, this is what close order drill is. This is not. Like technically under like the old 8th edition rules, if you guys remember those from the 8th edition codex, this actually would have counted for the Mordian Doctrine. GW back in there was like, no, that's obviously not close order drill. They're all loose and all over the place. This is close order drill, baby. Next is hardened fighters. The regiment is recruited from particularly violent societies and backgrounds and are particularly adept hand-to-hand combatants. Hardened fighters add 1 to their weapon skill. Sentinels additionally gain 1 attack as their machine is fitted with chainsaw blades, rams, and other accoutrements. This doctrine is available to any guard infantry squad at plus 15 points, spenny, per unit, or to a sentinel squadron at a cost of 10 points per sentinel. Quite spicy though. If you combine close order drill with hardened fighters, you end up with some guard regiments that really don't mind combat. Oh, I'm going to have +1 initiative, so we're going to fight at the same time. I might even fight first. And I'm going to have +1 weapon skill, so you're going to go from hitting me on 3s most of the time to hit me on 4s, because it'd be my weapon skill 3 versus your weapon skill. Well, my normally weapon skill 3 versus your weapon skill 4. If you're looking like Space Marines as a good baseline, now it's weapon skill 4 versus weapon skill 4. Yeah, hardened fighters is actually quite good. Not necessarily on the attack, but quite good as like a defensive thing to help deal with melee. Next, we've got jungle fighters, obviously for the Catachan boys. The regiment's members are recruited from a world with extensive thick forest or jungles. Any guard infantry unit can be upgraded to jungle fighters at plus 10 points per unit. Jungle fighters gain the following benefits. Can see through forest or jungle terrain up to 12 inches. That's big. Normally, they block line of sight and could be a great way of hiding units. Receive a 4+ cover save when in forest or jungle terrain. Normally, it'd be a 5-up. Move at full speed in forest or jungle terrain. These guys are great. May infiltrate if the mission permits and they deploy in woods and jungles. Any infantry squad normally able to include a heavy weapon team. Any infantry squad normally able to include a heavy weapon team, but not including one, can upgrade a single guardsman to carry heavy flame at plus 50 points instead. Amazing. So flame and heavy flamer squads. Oh, jungle fighters are so good. Jungle fighter units may never include las cannons, just too bulky. This specialization will lead a regiment to abandon bulky flak armor for a simple flak vest instead. All units taking this doctrine reduce their armor save from 5+ to 6+, and you can't take Camellia line, which is like camo cloaks and stuff, or carapace armor. I think it's always a bit weird it can't go with Camellia line. You think that would make sense with, like, you know, from a Tanith point of view, for example, but I guess that must be like a balancing thing. We'll see later on with Camellia line. 10 points per unit. Better cover save. Better movement. Better movement in terms of like heavy weapons as well. Being able to move and shoot things like flames and heavy flames is great. Going down from a 5-up save to a 6-up save really doesn't mean very much because everyone was ignoring your armor save anyway as a guardsman. Everyone had bolters, which were AP 5. So you give up an armor save that didn't matter to get a cover save, which is probably better anyway, because you, as a guard player, you always were relying on your cover saves anyway. Yeah, I'd take it. I'd take it for sure. Next, we have light infantry. The regiment is renowned for its stealth. This doctrine is available to any guard infantry unit without a transport vehicle at plus 10 points per unit. A unit with this ability rolls an additional dice when determining how far they can move through difficult terrain. That's any difficult terrain. So the difference between this and jungle fighters is jungle fighters can move through jungles as if they weren't there, essentially. But any other kind of difficult terrain like ruins and rubble, if you're in an urban map, they wouldn't really benefit from it. But light infantry, it doesn't move through jungles as good as jungle fighters, but it moves through all difficult terrain a bit better. So it's a bit more generalist. May infiltrate the mission permits. Amazing. May, if they are a normal infantry platoon squad that could include a single heavy weapon team, which is not to upgrade a single guardsman lasgun to a sniper rifle. May not combine with special equipment, carapace armor, or mechanized. So this is your Tanith one. This is the Tanith one. It might, I guess jungle fighters, are Tanith really from the jungle? They're not, because there's a difference between being from a jungle and being from the woods. And the Tanith were from deep woods, but they weren't from like the jungles, the steamy jungles of like Catachan, for example. So jungle fighters, I guess it makes more sense that represents your Catachans, whereas light infantry, combine that with your Camellia line, because you see there's no restriction there, that makes sense for representing your Tanith. Next up, we have sharpshooters. This was one that a lot of people took. I think this really was like the go-to for competitive, as far as competitive was back then. It's a very different scene, but for competitive / try-hard sort of guard players, sharpshooters was the one. Sometimes war has been a way of life for successive generations of the regiment, and consequently, they are formidable marksmen, having undergone military training from an early age. Any guard infantry model with a ballistic skill of 3 may make a single reroll of a shooting to hit roll of 1. The sharpshooter ability has no effect when firing plasma weapons, which few men survive long enough to master, or sniper rifles, where the slightest inaccuracy ruins the shot. This ability costs 10 points for a unit and can be applied to any guard infantry unit with at least one ballistic skill 3 model. I mean, you take this and you combine it with a dude manning a las cannon, or you combine it with a dude with a melter gun, and it's just great. It's just one, you get one reroll. Now, to the 10th edition player's mind, you might think this is rubbish, but you have to understand there were almost no rerolls back in 4th edition. Really, really few. And being able to upgrade every guard unit to basically get an inbuilt reroll was insane. It was crazy. It was mind-blowing. It was beyond the pale. So this was very, very popular because you could combine it with heavy weapons and really make them punch hard. But one thing I did find with sharpshooters is it started stacking up and getting very expensive. If you think about taking a basic guard squad at like, I think it was 65 points for a guard squad, then you load them up with like a las cannon and maybe like maybe a grenade launcher, and then you put sharpshooters on, you're looking at a basic 10-man squad starting to get close to 100 points, which was... It's expensive by 10th edition standards. It's even more expensive by 4th edition standards, where the game size was 1,500 points. So sharpshooters is one of those where you were tempted to give it to everyone, but you had to kind of be a bit more discerning with it. Next up, Xenofighters. After numerous wars, the regiment has learned how to combat particular types of Xeno. The permissible types are Orcs, Eldar, including Dark Eldar, and Tyranids. Any guard infantry unit or sentinel squadron may be upgraded to Xenofighters. You must specify the type of Xeno at a cost of plus 5 points per infantry unit or sentinel. When in close combat with an enemy of that race with a weapon skill attribute, Xenos Fighters, interesting how it changed from Xeno to Xenos, must be because now we're talking about plural or something, I don't know. Xenos Fighters hit on a 3+ regardless of respective weapon skill values. This was a fun one. It was a fluff one. And the whole idea behind it is I think you had to... Yeah, it actually says it here. We've got a bit more. You have to actually model it onto your guys. This advantage does not apply if the enemy has the independent character, Tyranid monstrous creature, or monstrous creature rule. Too few men survive their first confrontation with such a dangerous Xenos to build real expertise. The type of Xenos specifies the regiment. The type of Xenos species the regiment specializes in fighting must be apparent from trophies such as helmets/heads suspended from belts and vehicles or special standards. Some form of representation of the race in question of the regiment's members is mandatory for this doctrine. It is absolutely unacceptable to simply switch specialization to match your next opponent. Oh, based! So based. So this was like, your guys have got good at fighting one particular Xenos. You can't go Xenos Fighters and then go to a tournament and be like, oh, well, this time I'm going to be good at fighting Tyranids because I happen to be fighting Tyranids. And this time I'm going to be better at fighting Orcs because I happen to be fighting Orcs. It's like, no. You've got to have the trophies. You've got to have some way that you have modeled this on your army. And if you pick this doctrine, that is what it is for this regiment. You can't pick it from one game to the next. It's no. The whole point of this one was to basically, if you play against your orc mate regularly, you had a way of representing that experience that got accumulated. And you might think, oh, doesn't that make it one that you list tailor with? Yes, but it is very unimportant because hitting on a 3+ regardless of respective weapon skill values is, on the whole, not great, because think about guardsmen trying to take on orcs in close combat. It's not going to help you all that much being weapon skill 3+. I mean, maybe a little bit, but by and large, it's not going to help you all that much. So it was a fun one it was a fun and fluffy one. It's that simple. And it was one that was there to really add narrative to your regular games. Last but certainly not least, we have veterans. The regiment has been in service for several campaigns and includes a far higher ratio of veterans than normal. The normal 0-1 limit on hardened veteran units does not apply to this regiment. So normally you could only take one squad of veterans in your army. With this, you could take 3 because you had 3 elite slots and every single one could be veterans. That covers the skills and drills. And I think the really fun part of that is how you combine them together. You can make some light infantry sharpshooters, or you can have some close order drill hardened veterans with iron discipline. You can mix and match it how you want. I think there are some ones that naturally go quite well together, and there are some which you can pick just because it makes your army a bit better. Undo the veteran limit, take loads of stormtroopers, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. No dramas whatsoever. I do like the idea of taking Xenofighters and then combining that with like close order drill, and then combining that with iron discipline to really represent a regiment that's got very good at sort of holding off the orcs. I do like that. Or holding off tyrannid swarms. They're like, you've got to be in your, if you're spread out, the tyrannids will pick you off one at a time. If you spread out, the orcs, will just run in there and batter you all. But if everyone comes together, they fix bayonets, they hold the line, well then, they might just be able to hold off those melee armies. They might just be able to get a few stabs in before they go down. Yeah, it's cool. There's loads of different ways you can do it. That covers our skills and drills, but we still have one last category of regimental doctrine, and that is the special equipment. Some regiments are equipped with a piece of non-standard equipment that is a speciality of their world, or follow a training regime substantially different from that of most guard regiments. Whatever the reason, the regiment has a special trait. The Tanith First camo cloaks, for example, come into this category. The items below are examples that you can use initially. Other examples will be introduced in the future. This doctrine can be taken more than once, with each selection granting access to a different special piece of equipment. It is therefore possible to have troops with chameleon and carapace armor. This could be rationalized as armor with stealth qualities. Amazing. Suck it, Tau. We've got stealth suits as well. If this doctrine is taken, then each special piece of equipment must be applied to every available model. So if you choose chameleon, then every model that can have it must have it. However, if a doctrine can be applied to Rough Riders, you can choose to apply it to Rough Riders only. That's quite an interesting distinction between special equipment and things like skills and drills. In skills and drills, typically you can have some units which are hardened fighters and some units which aren't hardened fighters. You can have some units which have got some officers which have got iron discipline, and then you've got some units which some officers who don't have iron discipline. With special equipment, it's a must take. If you pick it, every unit that can take it must take it. So it really represents that this is a trademark item of the whole regiment. So, what are these special equipment choices? The first one is Chem Inhaler. Some undisciplined units have altered the gases in their rebreathers to include narcotics such as Slort and Karma. That is so cool. It's actually quite grimdark, and I don't think it's something you'd have like modern GW doing, because obviously it implies like drug use and all that kind of stuff, and GW is trying to be all sort of nice and shiny for the public masses. It's cool though. Back in the day, you could have troops that were sniffing glue. Savlar Chem Dogs come to mind. The effect is to make them even more indifferent to danger and loss. They will always test morale, leadership, or pinning with no negative modifiers. If they fail a morale check for 25% shooting casualties, they will be pinned rather than falling back. Cost, 10 points per unit. May not be combined with Iron Discipline or Diehards. Very interesting that. So any leadership test you ever have to make, no negative modifiers. I mean, if you've got a commissar who's in a command squad, the officer gets +1 leadership. What would what? We're doing it live. I'm scrolling up live. Let me just check here. Let's have a look. So you'd be leadership 10. Because the commissar gives the officer +1 leadership. Leadership 9 on the heroic senior officer. So you're leadership 10. And then you ignore basically all modifiers? That would be kind of crazy. That would mean you would almost never break. I mean, if you're all 11 or 12, sure, but... Very interesting. Imagine combining Chem Inhaler with independent commissars. Because You could have a unit which essentially would be on a leadership 10 rerollable. Oh no, it's not rerollable. They just you wouldn't need to. You wouldn't need to because it's not rerollable leadership with the commissar. It's just they auto pass if you kill a guy. Okay, so you could combine this with commissars, but it would be via the officer, basically give everyone leadership 10 and then them just not giving a crap about the modifiers. Quite strong. I feel like Kevin Hayler is quite strong, both figuratively and literally. Next up, we've got the Camellia line. Subunits are able to use the rare Camellia line material. It's difficult to say. Material in their uniforms or as cloaks. Camellia line automatically blends in with surrounding terrain, making the wearer much harder to spot. Any Guardian unit with Camellia line adds 1 to any cover save they are already allowed. Cost 10 points per unit. That's really good. That's why you can't combine it with jungle fighters. Because you'd be on a 3-up cover save. In jungle. Okay, that's why. That makes sense. Carapace armor. This was a very popular choice for a lot of guard players. Guard, infantry units, and Rough Rider squadrons upgrade their normal flak armor with Carapace armor at 20 points per unit. This means their armor save will change from a 5+ to a 4+. This is really big because basically every small arm in the game had a AP of 5, which ignored armor save 5+. So going up to Carapace armor meant that you were much more resistant to marine shots. Sometimes this will be conventional Carapace armor. Alternatively, it may be bulky feral plate mail. So you can have Carapace armor and warrior weapons. Cyber enhancement. The regiment is recruited from a world where extensive use is made of cybernetic enhancement and replacement. This is most common in the servants of the Adeptus Mechanicus. So you have like a guard. This is probably the first way you could make Skitarii, which is kind of interesting. Guard infantry units or Rough Rider units are cybernetically augmented at plus 20 points to the unit. Such a unit has an invulnerable save of 6, representing enemy attacks bouncing off their augmentations. So cool. So this is how you made Skitarii back in the day. Before 6th edition, before there was an AdMech codex, you had cyber enhancement Imperial Guard. 6 of invulnerable save isn't great. 20 points is a lot to ask for that, but it's cool. It's very, very cool. Last but not least, we had warrior weapons. The regiment is recruited from primitive warriors. Any model normally armed with a lasgun that does not have access to the armory replaces it with a las pistol and close combat weapon, or a pair of close combat weapons at a cost of plus 2 points per model. May not be selected with drop troops, mechanized, or grenadiers. So the first thing to mention is that this is a must replace, not may. So give all your las guns up for las pistol and close combat weapon. I think las pistol close combat weapon and a pair of close combat weapons essentially did the same thing. It gave you an extra attack in close combat. So that's actually pretty big. Going up from 1 attack to 2 attacks at 2 points a model, it's quite cheap as well. You've got to think, like, all of these other ones are very expensive, and often they work with things like your traditional guard platoons, where you're going to be taking like an autocannon, a grenade launcher, and they're going to start, like we said before, you can get quite expensive with guard platoons if you weren't careful. This one is actually really cheap. It's like, hey, take a normal guard platoon, and then for 2 points per dude, give everyone double attacks in melee. You could start combining that madness with, imagine combining that with close order drill. You could use like Empire models to represent that. So cool. Close order drill, and then maybe you go for like hardened fighters as well to get extra weapon skill. Maybe you go for iron discipline or chem inhalers. There's ways and means that you could. There's ways and means that you could take advantage of this. Very, very interesting. It says 2 points model, but it is important to note that in a 10-man squad, that is 20 points. So it is expensive in that way, but you're saving points on not taking like special weapons and stuff like that. Yeah. It's very cool. I think warrior weapons is probably a fluff one, because I still feel quite strongly like guardsmen don't want to be getting into combat. That's why we have Ogrins and Rough Riders. But I reckon you could do something with it. And I like the idea of of overwhelming a bunch of space marines with some essentially like Empire state troops that have gone into the 41st millennium. That's kind of cool. Or just having, going like warrior weapons and jungle fighters. There's all sorts of combos that you can do with that one to make combat guard. It's a way of making combat guard. At the end of the day, that's cool. Now that covers all of our special equipment, and it does cover everything in the main with regimental doctrines. But before I depart your company today, dear viewers, we'll have a quick breeze through some of the regiments of renown. So this is regiments which are almost preset, and there was always a bit of confusion back in the day whether you could actually choose to take these regiments or not, because they do have regimental doctrines and everything, but the regimental doctrine sort of text is a bit wishy-washy with it. Like on pages 58-61, we've included some famous regiments and the doctrines which represent their typical organization battle. You will notice that some regiments have more than 5 doctrines. This is a reflection of their glorious history. In practice, 5 doctrines is plenty to give a regiment a distinctive slant. Again, there's no requirement to use doctrine rules for fielding any particular regiment. So there was always a bit of a, can we use these or not? I think if I was to play 4th edition today, I would absolutely allow it. I'd be like, yeah, go nuts. You're running the Cadian shock troops, the Cadian shock troops. Sure, you can have more doctrines than you should have. That's fine. So if we look at what the Cadian shock troops do and what the other regiments do, we can see how they're kind of distinctive. So Cadian shock troops got grenadiers, so they could take stormtroopers as troops, sanctioned psychers, special weapons squads. So they could get stormtrooper squads again. They had iron discipline, so they didn't like to break, and they had sharpshooters, and they had conscript platoons. Your Valhallan Ice... Oh, and there was the whole thing about preferred special weapons, heavy weapons. That was just fluff. That you weren't limited. That was just fluff. Valhallan Ice Warriors, you got your Flamer and your Mortar. Terrible combination. One's a short-range assault weapon, one is a long-range bombardment weapon, but sure. You got heavy weapon platoons, priests, conscripts. You were Xenos fighters for orcs. You got close order drill and veterans. Talan Desert Raiders. Now these guys only got 5. The Valhallans got 6. The Acadians got 7. They got loads. Talan only got 5. Plasma gun and missile launcher, pretty good combo. Not a fan of missile launchers, but pretty good combo. Naturally sort of go together. Priests, hardened fighters, rough rider squadrons, light infantry, and sharpshooters. Sharpshooters is a really good one for them. Yeah. Mordian guard. All right, my boys. So firstly, we're better than a lot of other regiments because we got 6 doctrines. Grenade launcher and las cannon. Love that. That's a great combo. Totally okay with that. Crack grenades, las cannons. Fine with that. And then we got sanctioned psychers, rattling squads, heavy weapon platoons, sharpshooters, close order drill, and diehards. Sadly, no conscripts, but I'll just take the Mordian, the legally distinct Mordian guard. My ones happen to take conscripts. If you wanted to take the Mordians, if I want to take the Mordians, I could pick between this preset one, or I could customize if I wanted to include my conscripts. Armageddon Steel Legion, grenade launcher, missile launcher for the preferred weapons. Mechanized, of course. Stormtrooper squads, Xenos fighter orcs, rattling squads, and conscript platoons. Tanith, they got loads. Look at that. Tanith got 7 regimental doctrines. Preferred weapon, flamer, missile launcher, very appropriate if you've read the books. Light infantry, of course. Priests to represent, Iotani's Vial. Sharpshooters, veterans, hardened fighters, independent commissars to represent Gaunt, I suppose, and Harker. And special equipment, Camellia Line. Cattle Jungle Fighters, they just got 5, but they could take Ogre Squad, which is kind of cool. Flame and Heavy Bolter, decent combo, they're both anti-infantry. Veterans, of course, you've got the Katachan Devils, Jungle Fighters, Hardened Fighters, Special Weapons Squads, and Ogren Squads. The Savlar Chem Dogs, these were your prison fighters. So these are all your sort of normal regiments of renown. And then after that, you start getting into sort of almost homebrew. These were ones that, got sort of featured for the first time in this kind of in this codex. I think some of them were maybe before that, but you always see, what's kind of funny, when you see lore channels, they always end up doing some lore on things like the Terax Guard and stuff, saying this is an entire regiment of commissars. It's kind of cool. But yeah, Savlar Chem Dogs, they're your prison dudes, so they're getting the Chem Inhalers. They get Xenofighter Orcs because they were fighting on Armageddon a lot. Terax Guard, aka we've got more than 9 Guard at home. They got independent commissars, carapace armor, close order drill, grenadiers, stormtroopers. This was the whole thing of them being an entire regiment of commissars, which is kind of funny. The Harakoni Warhawks, this is one of these ones that I'm sure GW never expected these guys to be as popular as they are, but you still get people who pine after the Harakoni Warhawks, and this is the only rules I think they ever got, and people still love them. And you see them featured in games like Dawn of War. Yeah, it's crazy. Plasma Gun Heavy Bolter, decent combo. Drop Troops, Storm Troops, Carapace, Heavy Weapon, Platoon, Special Weapon Squads. Hey, Death Corps of Krieg. So this wasn't the first time the Death Corps were featured. The first time you ever saw Death Corps was actually in the Armageddon Codex. But this, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this, in my mind, is the first time that we see the Death Corps as we know them today. Because when they were featured in the Armageddon Codex, they were just Steel Legion repainted. This is the first time that we see them with the longer greatcoats. We see them with the spiked helmets, and we see them with the different gas mask rebreather assembly. So interest, definitely. This is like a landmark moment. This is, if you're a Krieg fan, this is truly where their journey began. And they did get 6 doctrines to represent that. They have Iron Discipline and Diehards and Hardened Fighters representing their bayonet charges. They've got Rough Riders to represent the Death Riders, Stormtrooper squads for the Grenadiers, and Heavy Weapon platoons. And then last but not least, we have got the Kanak Skull Takers. And this was an example of what you can do if you want to represent people from a feudal world. Warrior weapons, Ogren squads, Hardened Fighters, Rough Rider squadrons, and Diehards. Preferred special weapon, Flamer. Preferred heavy weapon, rarely used, which is kind of cool. And that, my dear viewers, fully covers everything about the Regimental Doctrines. If I were to go back to 4th edition, and I am going to go back to 4th edition and play a game or a few, what would be the Regimental Doctrines I would pick? Well, I mean, of course, I would take conscript platoons. I think that would be an absolute given. That might be the only restricted troop that I go for. Maybe special weapons squads, but for me, I want infantry and tanks. And so taking infantry platoons with conscript platoons and then Leman Russes, I think that would be where I'd probably end up. So I'd spend 1 point on conscript platoons, 1 point on close order drill, like just no doubt in my mind, 1 point in close order drill. That is just so Mordian right there. I think I'd take Iron Discipline. For sure, I really like the fact that I could regroup below half strength. I think that's really good for getting your scraplets back into the fight. What would I take after that is the big question. I would be tempted to go for veterans. I'd be tempted to go for veterans just because it is a free one. And then that would be my 4th, and I can just have a few more hardened veteran squads in there. What I'd probably do is start building like platoons within platoons. So I'd have like an infantry platoon with a conscript platoon and then like a veteran platoon. And that'd be like a little mini army. And then I might take like 2 of those and some Leman Russes or something like that. Or if I was going pure infantry, I'd end up with, multiples of those kind of platoons. The veterans, I want some good ballistic skill in the army. So that's probably where I'd do that. The last point would be a tricky one. I have to admit, it would be a tricky one. I probably wouldn't go for any special equipment. I'd be very tempted for Carapace armor, but I think it would get pretty expensive pretty quickly. You know what's crazy? I'm kind of leaning towards Xeno fighters. If I ended up playing against Xenos a lot, I would probably pick Xenos fighters. What I would probably do though is I would homebrew it a little bit, and I'd probably end up picking like Xenos fighters like Tau. It might not help me all that much because most of the time the Tau are going to be weapon skill 2 anyway, but it might help my conscripts. Like conscripts would normally hit Tau on 4s in combat because they're both weapon skill 2, but then Xeno fighters would allow me to hit them on 3s. That might be kind of cool. So I might do something like that. Or what I would do is go for independent commissars. That is where I think I'd take it, because I think I'm a big fan of commissars leading squads, and I think being able to take commissars leading blobs of conscripts would be really, that'd be absolutely my jam. And the other last one I might go for would be priest, but I'm pretty certain I would go conscript platoons, close order drill, iron discipline, and then veterans. And then I'd probably go Xenofighters if I was, homebrewing it with Tau, or I'd go independent commissars if I wasn't wanted to play, if I wasn't playing against a lot of Tau. That's how I'd do it. But of course, that's just what I would do. Let me know what you guys would pick down in the comment section below. Firstly, what do you think about these regimental doctrines? What is the flavor that is going through your mind right now? And also, how would you like Games Workshop to bring something like this back? Just basically lift it and translate it straight into 40k, almost like it is right now? Or would you want them to come up with a slightly different system for maybe modern 40k? And I guess the other big question is, what combos would you go for? What do you think are the most powerful combos? If you were trying to get the most juice out of this, what do you think are the most powerful combos? But also, separate to that, what would be the combos you would go for fluff reasons, to really represent your dudes? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button. And if you want to see more Old Hammer content, then subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Picklock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.